Essentially, we used to teach basically there are 3 concepts to a really good game. That's intent, freedom from outcome, and momentum. And if you get those kind of right, you have a core fundamental basis for game overall. And intent is, we say, being clear about who you are and what you want, being clear that you're a man and she's a woman, making sure that it is that type of interaction, not a platonic interaction that's going nowhere. Freedom from outcome, a lot of people get confused when they put intent and freedom from outcome together. Freedom from outcome means not caring about the result of the interaction so much, not being attached to it, being willing to fail, being willing to walk away from any particular girl, and not getting too caught up in trying to make it work. What you find a lot of times in game is that when you are trying to make it work, you're coming off as having an agenda, and that can be creepy, that can be needy, and that can work against you. Right? But there's this paradox of freedom from outcome along with intent, which is something that I'll speak to a lot in the next hour or so. And then the last is momentum. Momentum is the idea that whatever you do in life or in game, the longer and the more you do it, the easier it gets to do that thing. Right? So the first time, if any of you can remember back to the first time you ever walked up and approached a girl, you were probably pretty nervous. I know I was. I know the first time I went out to go do approach, I walked around a mall for 4 hours and talked to 0 women, right? And then I went out again and walked around for 4 more hours and approached 0 women that time as well. So, I mean, obviously, I was in very negative momentum. Now I've done pickup for almost 15 years now at this point. Talking to a girl is not that big of a deal. The approach anxiety is mostly gone. So, you know, I have that level of momentum. And especially if you've been talking to people throughout the night, it gets easier and easier. A lot of times your first couple sets are a little like shaky, you're not really there, and then you kind of just let go, get yourself in a flow, and things go better and better. And especially a really good set or a really bad set can put you into momentum, because that tends to put some energy behind what you're doing, right? You either start feeling like you have value in the environment because people there like you, and that helps your momentum and helps you convey yourself better. Or interestingly enough, if you get a really negative reaction and nobody, like, you know, the bouncer doesn't come throw you out of the club, you start to realize it's a safe environment. Nobody beat you up, nobody threw you out. It's okay, there's some freedom here, and you can kind of express yourself then. So it's giving yourself permission to express yourself that really helps there as well. So those are the 3 concepts that we teach a lot as sort of core concepts to game: intent, freedom from outcome, and momentum. But let's talk really, really deeply about intent, because intent really is the difference between just being a cool social person and actually having game. Right? The difference between being that person that has a fun conversation and being the guy who, you know, goes home with a girl at the end of the night, or who ends up with a date, or ends up with a girlfriend, or whatever your outcome is. Okay? And for many of us, I think the way that we're raised, we're kind of taught not to have intent. Right? I mean, do you remember back to like maybe middle school, where like if you have a crush on someone, you're always like trying to keep it secret, like, no, I don't like them, that's not whatever, right? Because you would like no one to know who you like until you're actually dating or something like that, because you don't want to be found out as having a crush and then not having that crush back, right? And why is that? Where does that come from? Well, it comes from the fact that through most of human history, we're in very small tribes. We're in tribes of, say, between 20 and 150 people. And in those environments, whatever reputation you had lasted with you for your entire life. So let's say within that tribe, you liked a particular girl that had, like, you know, marginal social status within the tribe, and she rejected you. Well, now other girls in that tribe who have higher social status than her, or even like similar or slightly lower social status than her, are now evaluating against that and thinking if they date you, within the tribe, their social status is concurrently lowered. Okay, so that's where it's all coming from. It's this sort of like this idea that in that society, our actions have these really long-term consequences, and within that society, the approval of the society is very key to our survival and very, very key to our ability to pass our genes along. So it literally is life and death from a genetic perspective, and that's why there is this desire to not show intent until it's reciprocated. There's this desire to play it safe. But that doesn't make as much sense nowadays. Nowadays, in a tribe of 7 billion some people, where a lot of people are strangers and people move from city to city, job to job, have differing social circles throughout their life, that no longer is logical or makes much sense, but is still in our genes and is still part of what makes us human. So it's very natural to have those sorts of feelings. It's very natural to want to play it safe, right? The other thing too to realize about that environment where we came from versus the environment where we are now is that in that environment, you knew people for most of your life. And so it was very unlikely that you would do one thing that would massively change their opinion of you for the better, right? If you are in a tribal society, like the good hunter who provides for the tribe or the good warrior who does well in battle, whatever, you've probably been that for quite some time, and people have gotten to know that. And like one amazing like act is not gonna like set you so high apart, or taking one crazy risk is not gonna make people's entire perception of you change. However, doing something really wrong potentially could, right? If you totally screwed someone over in the tribe, that could ruin your reputation with the tribe and could get you cast out. Or if you committed some sort of crime, that could potentially get you cast out of the tribe, right? So you're in a situation where people know you very well. Your upside for taking big risks is sort of minimized. Your downside for taking big risks or like failing the tribe in some way is very much maximized. And so it leads to this environment where it makes sense to be very risk averse. It makes sense to play it safe. It makes sense to follow the herd. It makes sense not to get out of line with the tribe, right? But the funny thing is, nowadays, if you want to stand out, you have to do something to stand out. And most girls, especially most attractive women, are getting approached often enough that they have some level of choice. Right? So if you are just the next average guy who talks to them, or worse yet, if you're the next average guy who doesn't have the balls to talk to them, you're not doing anything to set yourself apart. You're not going to get a lot of results. And it's very possible that you could, if you don't take any risks, go through your whole life and never end up with any girls. So we're now in a situation where that matrix of risk and reward has kind of been flipped on its head. Now, obviously, there are certain things like you don't want to be like so far out there. You don't do like stuff that's like crazy and life risking and whatnot, or risking like, you know, criminal whatever. But you do need to take risks. You do need to step up, and it's important to stand out. Understand that girls do not sleep with or get into relationships with guys that they kind of like. Okay? Girls get into relationships, get into serious things with guys who they think are fucking amazing. Right? Great model for this is a guy, a mentor to a lot of us, and he has a philosophy. He says, if I go talk to 20 girls in a night and 19 out of 20 reject me and hate me, I'm okay with that, as long as 1 out of 20 thinks I walk on water. Right? That's what he wants. He wants it basically to be a situation where he has to be loved or hated. He doesn't want a bunch of girls to be like, oh, he was pleasant. Oh, he was nice. I'd, consider talking to him again, I suppose, maybe. Right? He doesn't want that. And he doesn't care about the negative, because the negatives he's never going to see again. The positives are, obviously, become very good results, become girls who he can have in his life for years and years. So what he's trying to do, and what in a cold approach scenario you should often try and do, is to be polarizing. Be yourself to your absolute fullest, and some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. Not everybody is going to like you. There is no personality or no one person that everybody's going to like. But certain people will really resonate with you. And if you're being your truest self, the ones who will resonate with you will resonate the most with you by doing it that way. Okay? And the funny thing, the ironic thing, so it goes in with this idea of 19 out of 20 may hate me, one's going to think I walk on water. The fact that he is conveying himself in a true way, the fact that he is being authentic about who he is, he's probably going to make a higher percentage respond well to him that way than by trying to pander to them and cater to them and try and say what they want to hear, right? It's much better to be your best self and let those who like you as your best self like you, and let those who don't go on their way, than to try and like meticulously figure out exactly how to like convey yourself or like manipulate perception to make people who weren't supposed to like you in the first place like you, all right? So I guess the core there is, one, be a cool person that has some likable traits, hopefully, right? And then put those traits out there, put them on steroids, and be liked the most that you possibly can. So that's what we're trying to do in general in cold approach game. Now in a social circle, it would be a little bit different than that. In a social circle, you're a little bit more like that tribe, right? Because you have friendships over a period of time, you have more lengthy interactions with people, and very importantly, because in a social circle, you're gonna see people over and over again, so you don't have to convey your entire personality so quickly, right? The reason why you have to be a little risky when you're meeting a stranger or you're on a cold approach is that if they don't like you enough in that first few minutes to want to continue seeing you, you never will see them again. In a social circle, you have a lot of time to convey who you are. And also, you can be conveying who you are through what your friends say about you, through people seeing you from afar, through social media, like all kinds of stuff like that. So it's a bit of a different environment. So understand that distinction. But understand that in either case, at some point, as a man, if you want things to move forward, you probably will have to make a move.
Yeah,
I know, right? And
Never kissed a girl at all, or in set?
At all. There was no difference for me. Like I was, I'd gone, well, actually, there's that too. What's a set didn't exist yet. That's true, actually, when I started. That term didn't even exist. That's how old I am. But so I went on dates for 9 months, and I never kissed a girl, and I had plenty of opportunities. I had plenty of invitations. There's one in particular that I can recall. I went out with this girl. She's a really cute girl. I liked her. It was funny because it was a really awkward interaction. And knowing what I know now, I know that she was just probably quiet and attentive, and she liked me, and she was nervous, right? But at the time, I was just like, oh, that was a shitty date. I thought it was just like a terrible date. And so I walked her back to like her dorm room, and I was just like, well, this is done. I'll never see her again. Because I thought I'd performed poorly on the date. And at the end, I was just like talking, and I went like this as I was talking, just like as an expression. And I wasn't even trying to shake her hand, but she goes, don't you think a handshake's a little too formal for us? Like just like hinting at like standing at the door, saying a handshake's too formal. She's like saying like, kiss me, idiot, right? But I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I give her like the most platonic hug ever. Yes, this happened. And then I walked away. And then it was a self-fulfilling prophecy because then she never saw me again. So it worked out really well for me. I got exactly what I expected. So yeah, it was really bad. And the fact of the matter was I had lots and lots of opportunities to actually kiss a girl, but I didn't do it because I was too afraid of making her uncomfortable, too afraid of getting rejected. And I mean, to be fair, I was getting closer and closer. When I first started dating, I was afraid to even touch the girl. Like I wouldn't even like touch her hand or like touch her shoulder or whatever. Like I had to convince myself on early dates. It's like, okay, here we go. Touch her elbow. Okay. Oh, she didn't kill me. Good. Right? So I mean, it's a progression, and I finally got there. And I mean, it was so much that I had permission before I acted on it that the first girl I ever kissed is actually the first girl I slept with too. Because once you know, she liked me enough that I knew I had to kiss her, and I knew I'd be kicking myself if I didn't, then like she was super down for everything else. But you need to go for it. You absolutely need to go for it. And during that period, like nowadays, would I ever be like, can I kiss you now? Right? Like I would never like this. No, it's just so like, ugh. Like it just like makes like, yeah, there's nothing like it just happened about it. It's very like, let me try for outcome X. But that said, during that period of time, had I said like, you know, I really want to kiss you now, that probably would have been a massively positive step in my game, right? So it's better if it's smooth and it just happens. It's better if you're calibrated and suave and like sophisticated and charismatic and charming about how you show your intent. But worst case, just show the fucking intent and take your chances, right? It's better to do it wrong oftentimes than not do it. And that's why one big thing that I say is I don't think that I've ever lost a girl by trying to kiss her. I don't think I ever have. I've lost many, many girls by not trying to kiss them. And this doesn't mean that every time I try and kiss a girl, she kisses me, right? There are a lot of times I've gone for a kiss and she gives me the cheek, or it's like, oh, what are you doing? That kind of thing, right? But in those circumstances, either A, I was gonna lose her anyway, but a lot of times that even makes the interaction better, right? Because think about this. You try and kiss a girl, she doesn't kiss you, but she stays and keeps talking to you. She's now talking to you under the premise of knowing that you wanted to kiss her. She's now talking to you knowing that it's a man-to-woman conversation. So you've at least established that, right? And so the interesting thing is, if you do go for the kiss, obviously, yes, it's better if she kisses you back. It's a ton better if she kisses you back. But if you try and she doesn't, you've still done your job, which is convey the nature of the interaction. As a man, if you want things to move forward, you probably will have to make a move. Most women won't make that move for you unless they really, really, really are sprung on you. So it will limit your opportunities at the very least considerably if you don't make those moves, okay? Now, to think about what it would be like to interact without intent, I want to give you a little bit of an example. let's say you went into like a car dealership and you're gonna go try and buy a car. Now, what's the complaint people have about car dealerships all the time is like, oh, they're all so pushy, they're all trying to like manipulate me and sell me, right? And fair enough, they are pretty like, some of those guys are pretty sleazy and you know, they try and sell you one thing and then you go in the back room and you find out like you're signed on for a bunch of other shit you have to say no to later and whatnot, right? But imagine the opposite. Imagine the opposite. Imagine you went in to buy a car, you went on that car lot, you're looking at cars, and you sit down at a table with like a dealer and he starts asking you about like, yeah, where you went to school and what sports team you like and you know, what your favorite food is and I don't know, where you're from. And at first you're like, okay, cool, he's just trying to be friendly with you. Let's say like an hour on, he hasn't even mentioned cars. How would you feel about this particular car buying experience? Right?
How are you still there?
Right, exactly. You'd be sitting here thinking, this is a fucking waste of my time. This isn't going anywhere. This isn't what I signed on for. What is this shit? Okay? Understand that the way that most men interact with women is essentially that interaction. They go in and maybe they go in and they say, hey, you're cute at the start of the interaction. And then they go, so how about that weather? It's a little cold in Dallas this week. Yeah, it's a little nippy, right? Yeah, so where are you from? Oh yeah, that's interesting. That's south of Oklahoma, right? Okay, interesting. Okay, cool. North of Mexico. Got it. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, I don't even know what is it. East of whatever. East of the ocean. I don't know what the fuck.
West of the ocean too.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's okay. No more geography. The point is, if you don't get to the point, there is no point to the interaction. Okay? You need to bridge that gap. You need to put it out there. And actually, this is a core reason for a lot of the biggest complaints guys have in game. Okay? What are the biggest things that I hear as sticking points in game? Number one, I ran out of things to say. I ran out of things to say. Well, if you are trying to create a new topic all the time and you're just going around in circles and you're not having any kind of direction to your interaction, you are going to have to continually restart new conversations. You're talking about a topic, it's going to peter out and be like, okay, cool, let me reach for the next topic. Oh, okay, let's talk about the weather, let's talk about sports, let's talk about this other thing. It's never going to go anywhere. But if you actually convey to the girl, I like you, I want to find out about you, this could go somewhere, now you have sort of like that topic that always exists. That topic you can always go back to and that topic that's ever present in the conversation. And once that's introduced, once it's about finding out if you like each other, once it's no longer about like I as a separate entity and you as a separate entity, but about we as a together entity, once that exists, that's a topic you can always go back to and it always exists. So you no longer can possibly run out of things to say, because you always have that topic. It's like within the car buying experience, right? If you were doing small talk, yes, the dealer could run out of things to say to you in terms of small talk, but at any point he'd be like, so do you prefer black or red for the car? So do you want the 2-door or the 4-door? Right? There's always a direction that things can move in, and therefore there is an inherent something to say. That's very, very, very critical that that be the case. And that's one of actually the key reasons to show intent, aside from just the fact that it does move the interaction forward, is that it makes everything else within the interaction make more sense, have more purpose, have more points. So that's absolutely critical. There's another concept, it's called Fattic communication. It's a very fancy word that I learned from like a rhetoric class. But Fattic communication basically means there are certain things about a scenario or a situation that dictate what's going to happen within that situation. So say, for example, you go to meet with someone and you're not exactly sure what to expect. Like they just say, hey, can you come meet with me tomorrow? Right? And you don't know, like this is someone you vaguely know through a friend. You don't know if it's a friendly meeting, a formal meeting, a business, you don't know, whatever, right? So you show up, they open the door for you, and there's a long boardroom with people in suits, and they like firmly shake your hand and say, thank you for coming today, and then greet you by your last name. What kind of interaction is this now? It's like a very business interaction, right? Right? On the other hand, say that you show up and they're just like sitting at some like little restaurant in the building, and they're like wearing like, you know, casual-ish clothes, like, hey man, what's up? Come sit down. Right? Now it's a much more casual interaction. So this is the Fattic communication of the interaction. And so a lot of times, actually, this is what I call also chode intent. Fattic communication, I call it chode intent, because when I didn't know how to convey real intent, when I didn't know how to actually escalate on a girl, this is how I would show intent. right? I'd show intent, like I just have the most platonic interaction, and then I'd end the interaction by saying, what's your phone number? It was just a friendly conversation. I never said I like you, never said you're cute or anything could happen between us. I just had a conversation. I said, it was nice meeting you, what's your phone number? And I used the fact that phone numbers between men and women imply dating, and that was the only intent I would show, right? But it actually would put it in a dating frame. And then I'd make sure that when I called them and had them meet up with me, I'd make it like a formal date, right? I'd make it like, let's grab dinner or let's grab a meal together, something like that, not just, hey, let's hang out or something like that. So I used that Fattic communication to show intent. And it's not the best way to show intent, but it is something, right? And the nice thing is when you try and escalate, you try and kiss a girl, at the very least you are showing intent in some way. So we talk a lot about like direct versus indirect game, right? You guys may have heard this debate. If you guys were in the pickup as of like 2003 to 2006, that was like the hotly contested, debated topic. Should I approach direct or indirect? Right? Should I go up and say, hey, you're cute, I want to talk to you? Or should be like, my nails are painted, what's your impression? Right? Or hey, you know, my friend had this issue with his girlfriend, can you give me your advice on it? Right? So which is better? Which is better? Well, there's not really an answer as to which is better, but there is an answer which is both in and of themselves, if it's the only thing you do, suck. If you go in and you have a conversation that's all intent, you go, hey, you're hot. I don't know, I just think you're so hot. Like I'm looking at you, it's just turning me on.
Thank you.
Your smile just arouses me, and I just want to fuck you, right? If that was your entire interaction, maybe like one girl in 500 is just like ovulating and thinks you're super hot, and she's just like, okay, I'll go with this, right? Maybe like 1 in 500, maybe she'll say if that, who knows, right? It could happen. It could happen. Maybe she'll appreciate it. She'll be like, he was so honest. He was so honest. He just told me what he wanted. And I appreciated that because so many guys beat around the bush. They're like bad car salesmen, right? That might happen. But most of the time it's probably not going to work. On the other hand, if you go and say, oh yeah, so my friend had this conversation with his girlfriend and she was like, she said this jealous thing and and you go back and forth, and half an hour later, you still haven't told the girl, hey, I'm actually here to talk to you. Hey, I don't actually care about this situation. Hey, can we talk about something meaningful? Then yeah, you end up in what I call the half-hour conversation to nowhere, and you end up maybe getting a girl who is like, well, we talked long enough that I'll give him a phone number that I'll never answer. That's like your best case scenario, all right? So the point isn't that you need to be direct and like super heavy hardcore with your intent, or that you need to be indirect and never show intent. The point is that there always has to be a balance. There needs to be a balance. And the reason is, intent is moving the set forward. Intent moves the set forward. But you can only move the set forward at a pace that the girl is comfortable with. And then the other thing that I'll tell you with intent was we get to like the later stages of an interaction, or the closer to sex stages of an interaction, but it's actually true throughout the entire interaction, is this idea of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Okay? What that means is you are showing intent. I told you from the start, you want to show as much intent as you can get away with, but no more. And so at certain points, you are going to come up against some kind of resistance. You may show more intent than the girl's comfortable with. And that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, as long as once she communicates to you she's not comfortable, you actually back off, chill out, and then get to know her a little bit better, make her more comfortable, whatever, and then you can try again, usually in a different way. Right? Usually don't try and like push the same thing she said no to over and over again, because that's, number one, it's a little like fucking forceful and like try hard, but on the other level, it's just stupid, because she has to almost like admit she was wrong in order to say yes. Okay, so for example, if you've tried to hold a girl's hand like a couple times and she wouldn't do it, then stop trying to hold her hand. Just like, get to know her a bit better, get to a point where she likes you a bit, and then give her a hug. Right? You don't have to keep trying for the same thing over and over again. Or if you're trying to set a date with a girl, if you asked her to lunch a few times and she's like, no, then don't keep asking her for lunch, ask her for coffee or a drink, or to go play pool with you or whatever. Okay? So be a little smart about it. But remember that idea, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's important to be persistent. If you have belief in yourself, you will be persistent because you do believe that you are a good product. But at the same time, understand her subjective reality. Right? I'm going to tell you about a theory that I call social capital, which I think encompasses this really well. How many people are familiar with this theory, by the way, the idea of social capital or social currency? Okay, a few people. So the idea of social capital is this. When you first meet someone, you don't know them, they don't know you. You don't owe them anything, they don't owe you anything. They have no reason to expect much from you, you have no reason to expect much from them. So They might be open to hearing you. They might be open to giving you a little window to convey your personality and find out if you're cool. But they're probably not open to doing big favors for you right away, right? If you went door to door knocking and said, hey, can I stay in your house for a week, to random strangers, probably most people would say no, right? Because there's no social capital between you and them, and you're asking for something pretty big. If you went and talked to like your best friend since you were 5 and were like, hey, I'm in a situation, can I stay at your house for a little bit? He might not like it, but a lot of times he'll be like, okay, sure, I understand, you can come on in. Why? Because there's a lot of social capital built up between the two of you. There's a lengthy history of good interactions, of trust, of like positive communication, of maybe he's done some things for you, those kind of things. So that's been built up. Now, showing intent, and more to the point, escalating, moving the conversation forward, or the interaction forward in some way, that is sort of like spending social capital. That's trying for something, trying to move things in a direction. And again, that needs to happen. Go back to the car salesman example. If he never asked you to buy a car, he's wasting your time, right? So at some point it does need to happen. But if it's happening too fast, let's take the flip side. You walk on the car lot, he doesn't even ask your name. He says, you should buy this car now, here's a contract. How do you feel about that, car salesman? Right? That's too much intent, and that's no social capital built up. There's no trust there, there's no comfort. All right, so that's the other flip side of the coin.
Maybe 1 in every 500.
1 in every 5, yeah, one guy already decided what he wanted. It could happen. So that's kind of what you're balancing. You're balancing that you need to be showing intent, but you need to have the proper amount of social capital behind it. So next thing I want to ask you is what would your perfect set look like? What would your perfect interaction look like if you could like make it occur in your head? And my contention, at least for me, right, as a very competitive, goal-oriented, outcome-dependent person, is my ideal interaction should look a little bit like a bad porno. Okay? It should look a little bit like I walk up like, hey, you're kind of sexy. She's like, you're kind of sexy too. Like, yeah. What should sexy people do together? I'm at a loss. I don't know. She's like, I don't know, big boy. You tell me. Like, well, I'm not sure, but we could try this out, right? It should look about like that, right? A little bit of wittiness, just so I don't feel like a total slut. But essentially, it should be pretty direct and to the point. It should be like, I like you, you like me. Let's do something, right? That's how a perfect interaction would go. And ideally, you know, if my interactions went that way, I'd be, for the most part, happy. Now, afterwards, I would like them to cuddle and like talk to me so I don't feel used. But for the most part, like I'd be okay with that as a man. However, it's unlikely most interactions can go that way. Even if you were an extremely, extremely physically attractive man, it's probably not going to happen that easily or that quickly. What's going to happen in the real world is you go in with that as a possible intention, and then what will happen is the girl will be like, hey, I need to get to know you better. Or, hey, do you say this to all the girls? She'll give you some kind of shit test, make you jump through some hoops, make you get to know her, that sort of thing. And you should be okay with that. And ideally, not only should you be okay with that, you need to sort of enjoy that. You need to sort of like enjoy that and be alive in the process. If you're too much goal-driven, then it doesn't seem genuine to her, because that's what she's really testing you for. Okay, so now let's get a little more technical about intent. Let's get a little more technical. So you go open a girl, you want to show intent as early as you can get away with, right? Now that doesn't necessarily mean right off the open. If you are walking up to a girl that's with, you know, a group of 4 girls and they're walking fast in the other direction, it's unlikely if you go talk to one girl, hey, can you stop all your friends? I think you're hot, right? You're asking a whole lot of her without her knowing much. Now again, there's that, you know, one random girl out of a large sample that will be like, oh, I think this guy's cute, I'll stop. Or maybe she happens to be the leader of her group, or maybe she just happens to be amused by the situation and like stops them out of whatever, you know, whatever ironic pleasure. But most of the time, they're not gonna stop in that context. However, if you're saying, hey guys, I need your opinion really fast, I have to go, but real fast. And then like they're actually stopped and you go, actually, you're really cute, who are you? Now that you've like had a little more interaction, conveyed a little more personality, talked to them for like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and then you convey that, you've made it an easier window for you to show that intent, okay? So this is my own personal style. Other guys would disagree with me on this, but my style and what I find works for me and works really well for students in general is you want to be as direct as you can get away with. You want to show intent as much as you can, but no more. right? If you show too much without having the social capital behind it, it ruins the interaction. If you show the right amount, it's great. If you show too little, it's okay, but it's going to slow things down, and it's going to make things like, it's not going to have that same like amazing nature. Like, you know those interactions where like, even from the start, you're just like, hey, I like you, and you just see like the eyes, and you can tell she's on. That's when you showed the exact right amount of intent. That's when you hit the right blueprint with it, and you just were there. Okay, so you want to be showing as much intent as you possibly can. Now, there are 4 ways to show intent. Okay, and this is very important because most guys, when I say show intent, what do they think of? They think of like beast mode. Like grab the girl, yank her, hit her over the head, drag her back to your cave, right? It's not just physical. You can show intent on a bunch of different levels. The 4 that I've come up with, and there may well be more, but the 4 that I know of, and you want to have all of these present in the interaction, are A, physical. Yeah, that's important. Second is logistical, moving the actual physical interaction to a conducive location, closer to a place where you can have sex, to a place where you can be private with the girl, that sort of stuff. Another manifestation of this is say I approach some girl on a street corner. I just start talking to her because, you know, she's hot and that's where she happened to be, so that's where I approached her. If I stand there for an hour on the street corner talking to her, that's a little odd. Yeah. How often have you stood on a street corner doing nothing with a friend just talking? It doesn't really happen. If you're with a friend, you're like, hey, you know what, let's just go grab a coffee. Or you know what, let's go back to my car, or hey, let's go inside where it's warm, or hey, let's sit down on this bench, or something. You wouldn't do that in a normal interaction. So if you do that in a pickup interaction, it feels like a pickup. It feels weird and unnatural. Whereas if you move things logistically forward, it gets more natural, it gets more intimate, and there's more agreement that you and she are an item. There's more agreement that you and she are together, okay? So that's logistical escalation. So you have physical escalation, logistical escalation. Next is, there are 2 forms of verbal escalation. First is verbal escalation, you-me escalation. So for example, if I'm talking about random topics with you, I'm talking about the weather, then I'm talking about sports, then I'm talking about politics, and I've never said anything about you or anything about myself, that's like even beyond platonic. That's like a skirting the surface conversation, right? If all of a sudden I start saying, oh, you're very interesting, or oh, I love this thing, now I'm starting to bring you and me into it, that's a little bit more escalated, right? Now if I make more sort of like, risky statements about you, like, you know what, I think I like you, but I'm not sure. Like maybe things that convey emotion between you and I. That's another level of intimacy where I'm conveying there's a possibility of something between us and I'm figuring it out. And then the last level of that is when there's no longer you and me, but now all of a sudden we're speaking with the word we, right? We are this, we are that, we are the other. And that's escalation of the you-me dynamic. Right? So you start off as strangers, then you start off as strangers who are interested in getting to know each other, or at least, okay, strangers who are interested in expressing themselves, strangers who are interested in getting to know each other, and then a collective, right? That's kind of the progression there. So that's the next form of verbal escalation is the you-me escalation. And then the other form of verbal escalation is escalating the conversational topic, right? If you're talking about the weather, you're not very close to sex. If you're talking about how you lost your virginity, you're getting a little closer to sex. And obviously, if you jump right in, right, if you walk straight up to a girl and be like, so I want to tell you, I was actually 19 when I lost my virginity. It's funny because she might be, whoa, what the fuck? Like, it's a little sudden. It's a little quick, right? And so what you did there is you violated intent, right? You showed more intent than you could get away with on the verbal level. So what you want to be doing is on each of these levels, showing the amount of intent that you can get away with. Also, it's kind of important that you escalate on all the levels kind of at the same time, right? If you're getting super physical with the girl, but you haven't like you're talking about the weather, like can you imagine walking up and be like, so it's really cold in Dallas, and you start like groping her and pulling her hair and stuff like that, right? That'd be a little weird. It'd be a little weird. On the other hand, if you were like talking about like the most intimate stuff you've ever talked about and you haven't touched the girl and you're still standing in the exact place that you met her 8 hours later, right? That's a little weird too. Okay, so you obviously want these things to move forward concurrently, right? The next thing that I would say is a little bit on physical escalation. And this is a particular thing that I really like because again, you want to be moving things forward, but you don't want to be taking risks. So what I like to do is what I call invisible escalation physically. And so what I do is I just give a lot of opportunities for escalation without forcing anything. Okay, so as an example, I'll use you just because you're at the front of the crowd. If I wanted to like get close to you and like cut space and whatever, if I go like this, how does that feel? Does that feel a little like? Does that feel like weird and awkward a little bit? Just a little bit, right? If on the other side I was like, hey, come over for 1 second, right? Now we're equally close. I've actually touched him, right? But it probably feels a little more natural. Does that make sense? Go ahead and sit down. Thank you. So by inviting him into my personal space, as opposed to going into his personal space, it's much less invasive. It's much less creepy, right? That's the example. The difference. You guys know the difference between like the claw and the hand of God. Do you know these two moves? The claw is where you like reach out and like grab the girl and like, hey, come here, I want to talk to you, right? Which can actually work.
Demonstration.
Of the claw? Stand up. Stand up, yeah. All right.
Should I just walk along?
No, just stand. It's okay. I don't like doing claw moving targets. It's not good. And for the claw, you need to be.
Targets, man.
Anyway.
The slaves.
Yes. I grew up in the pickup community as of 2000. I have residual lingo. Take your hand out. Okay. So the claw would be something like, hey, you, I want to talk to you, right? Now the key thing here is that I am making a strong move. I am trying something, right? But I'm not, first of all, I'm not yanking so hard I'm like throwing you against the wall or anything like that. And then secondly, like,
That was very good.
yeah, if you're compliant, you come with. If you were to pull back, I would just drop it, right? If you were to pull back against it, I would drop it. But you also want to pull hard enough you know they're there. You can't just be like that, hey, could you maybe come here, right? So it's not like that, okay? So you want to be firm enough and strong enough that like it's like a strong masculine move, but you don't want to be so like I won't take no for an answer that you're like actually like assaulting or molesting anyone. Okay, so that's what you want to be doing there. And there's sort of that moments. There's one other thing. Stand up again. So another thing with the claw, it's like strong but soft, right? Yeah. So here I'm fairly firm, but when he gets here, it's like soft, right? I'm not like jaws of life, can't go anywhere. It's soft. It's fine. It's a pleasant experience. All right. You're still there. We're still holding. We could even go here. There's all kinds of things we could do. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. But there's a lot of things you can do with it. As long as you're standing up, I'll show hand of God as well. Hand of God, rather than reaching out and grabbing the hand, would be like, hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah. Okay.
You're very cute, right? The difference there.
I'm gonna do that one.
Go ahead and sit down now. Thank you. The difference is instead of reaching out and taking the hand, I'm offering a hand, and only if she takes it, then I'm escalating. Right? And so that is a situation where you have much more permission. So imagine a scenario. So you can do both of these. The claw actually is a good opener. It's more hit or miss. Right? Certain girls will be like offended by it, in which case you're like, oh, I'm sorry, back off, no big deal. And then certain girls will really love it because they like a strong dominant man. So it's more hit or miss, whereas hand of God is more safe. Right? It's more of a safe approach. And imagine a scenario of there's a girl with three big, burly, strong guys around her. If you reach in there and you like claw the girl out, right? That's not gonna go so well most of the time. If any of them have any sort of like any interest in her whatsoever, or any protective feelings toward her whatsoever, they probably aren't gonna like it, right? Even if she does, because sometimes the girl will like that, but the guy's like, what the fuck? Right? And also importantly, they're totally within their rights to step and be like, hey bro, back off. Right? Because you did do something that is, a little socially dicey, right? So they're totally within their rights to be like, hey, that's not okay. Fucking stop it, right? And I mean, to be fair, if you were in that same situation, you might do what they do too, right? So totally fair. On the other hand, say you do hand of God, you put the hand out, she takes your hand, and then you pull her out. Now she complied to the interaction. She's part of the escalation. She is clearly receptive to it. Now the guys really have no right or no reason to be like, hey, fuck off or whatever. You see the difference? So in one case, you went in and were like, this is what I want, I'm gonna take it, right? And again, you can do that and you can get a result with it. But usually in my philosophy, it's better to just offer the escalation, and if she takes it, great. If she doesn't, no big deal. And ideally, if you offer the escalation in such a way that it's not a big deal, if she doesn't take it, then you just continue the interaction as though nothing happened, and you didn't have an overt rejection in the interaction. So again, within social capital, every time you're asking for something, she says no, it's like, you lost a little bit of social capital, you tried for something, didn't get it. It kind of makes things a little dicey. Whereas if you're just like, hey, and then she doesn't take the hand, you just keep talking, right? It's like it never happened. It's subtly, you kind of know what happened, she kind of knows it happened, but she's not really sure. Another big one is say that I want to hug a girl. A lot of times instead of like reaching out and like just grabbing her or groping her, I'll just talk and I'll kind of put up my hand like this, and sometimes she'll come in and we'll hug, right? If she doesn't, I just drop my hand and no big deal. Just keep talking. You can do that too. You can do that too. The problem with that is that it's more overt, right? Ideally, it's better. It's good that you bring up that point. Ideally, if possible, it's better that things appear to just happen. Right? The more you have to talk about the pickup process, the more you have to talk about we're doing this, we're doing that, the less sexy it is. A great example, Max actually told me this example, is imagine a guy who in bed was like asking permission for everything and narrating everything. Be like, can I put my penis inside of you right now? Is it okay if I thrust back and forth? May I please thrust harder now? Right? Like on a certain level, like that's the epitome of having permission.
His was better.
Sorry. That's the epitome of having permission, but it also like takes all the sexiness out of the interaction because there's no spontaneity, there's no it just happened, right? And so there's always this balance. What's that?
In this kind of situation, you got to think like you're putting yourself out there asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so A, it's a risk, right? You're putting yourself out there asking. B, you're drawing attention to what's happening instead of letting it just happen. Like the ideal pickup, the ideal relationship scenario, it should be like, it just happened. Like, imagine like a cheesy country song, right? It's like, you know, our eyes met across like a crowded bar and all of a sudden one thing led to another and whatever, right? Something like that. It's not like, I thought to myself, what is the perfect thing to say to him? And he contemplated what to say back to manipulate me into liking him. And then, right? First of all, there's no ring to that. But secondly, just the concept, it would never work, right? It's not the way that people view romance happening. They view it just happened. Okay, so you don't want to be drawing attention to it so much if you can avoid it. But that said, if you are truly afraid to escalate, if you are truly afraid, and the only way you can do it is by narrating it or is by talking about it, you're definitely better off doing that than not escalating at all. This way, whenever you ask a girl what she'd really like, how she'd really like a man to act, how she'd really like a man to pick her up, what do they always tell you? And it's kind of good advice and it's kind of bad advice at the same time. What do they always say? So like, I want a gentleman who treats me nice and opens doors for me and treats me with respect and likes me for who I am, doesn't just want me as a piece of meat, etc., right? And that's kind of true. Here's the thing. When you ask a girl to like tell you what her ideal guy would be like, the first thing she does is picture in her head an ideal guy, which probably is someone she doesn't deserve. Okay? Now, this guy who she doesn't deserve, who she is massively attracted to, but doesn't necessarily trust, and he doesn't necessarily have any reason to stick around for her or be with her, how would she like that guy to act? She'd like that guy to act like she's really special and she can trust him and what they have really, really is unique to them, because then in her mind she can justify why this guy who she doesn't deserve would stay with her, right? So that gives her value plus comfort, right? So usually when you ask a girl, how would you like a guy to treat you, she imagines a guy who she would already like and thinks, how would I like that guy to treat me? And for that guy, because he already has value, she mentions all the comfort factors. And that's true. The girl legitimately would like that from the right guy. But it's also important to be the right guy. It's also important to be a guy who arouses her emotionally. And for most of us, we're either not fortunately like blessed with being so good looking that girls just like look at us and want to drop their pants, or we're not like a billionaire CEO of some company, or we're not in a situation where the girl happens to accidentally see us doing something really amazing or impressive. So most of the time, we have to actually convey some of those value characteristics as well as the comfort characteristics, right? We have to actually be that person that they don't deserve, so to speak, okay? But that's what everybody wants. That's what everybody wants, and that goes back to the original question, is they want that person they don't deserve, but that they feel will stick around for them, okay? And so that means that there are different things that need to be conveyed. Number one, you need to be conveying that you are high value to a girl. Number two, you need to be conveying that there's some trustworthiness, right? And so if you are so direct with your intent, being direct with your intent, it actually is in some ways very attractive, okay? The fact that you can be direct and intentful, it says good things about you, right? If I can go up to a girl and be like, hey, you're hot, right? What does that say? That says that throughout my life, when I've said to girls, hey, you're hot, I've probably gotten a better response rather than a worse response, right? That means that girls have probably found me attractive at some point, right? Number two, it means that I'm confident enough to take a social risk. And that means, again, that when I've taken social risks in the past, that they've turned out well. They've turned out at least not terribly, right? Nobody's smashed me over the head with a rock in the caveman days, right? So that's turned out pretty well. Number three, it's very natural. Understand this. It's totally normal and natural for girls and guys to like each other. It is, right? If you were stuck on a desert island with a girl for your life, I don't really care how ugly the girl is. You guys would probably end up having sex. It just would happen. If it's your only choice, if there's a guy and a girl together, the natural state of affairs is that sex happens. Now in a society, there's always choices like you versus another guy, the girl versus another girl, so then it might not happen. But it is natural and normal for women to like each other. So the fact that you say, hey, I like you, and you're honest and upfront about it, there is something very natural and normal and honest about that, right? And in fact, it's a lot more trustworthy to be like, hey, I like you, than to like try and I don't really like you so much, but then you're hovering around trying to impress her, that kind of stuff, right? So actually being upfront and being honest with it is actually more trust engendering as well as trying to be like tricky or manipulative. However, if that's your entire interaction is I like you, you're hot, there's no real reason to that. She hasn't earned it. She hasn't earned it for anything other than the fact that she is physically attractive. That doesn't make her special in any way. So she has to wonder, number one, why is he so into me if I haven't earned it? If he's so into me and I haven't earned it, well, he's definitely not the guy I don't deserve, right? So you lose out on value. Secondly, it doesn't seem genuine, so you lose out on comfort, right? So it is very important that there be some interaction and that she discover a genuine reason you like her, and ideally that you discover genuinely whether you like her or not. Being a selective guy goes a long way. All right. So what do we know so far about intent? We know that it's absolutely necessary. If you don't have intent in the interaction, you're just spinning your wheels and going nowhere, right? We know that you need to have some level of intent, but it can't just be the only thing going on in your set, because if that happens, you're very hollow. You seem to be very outcome dependent, very manipulative, very much like you want to use somebody for something instead of have something with somebody. Does that make sense? Right? If you're all outcome oriented, all intent all the time, that doesn't really work. So you need to have some kind of a balance, right? So how do we figure out this balance? How do we know where we're at? Well, for that, we look at the social capital of the situation. We look at how much have we built up, and then what can we get away with? And here's the sort of extension of that model. So you basically are doing a couple different things. Anytime that, say if I'm interacting with you, I don't know you, but if we're just talking, we're having a cool conversation, it's fun, maybe I'm even like teaching you something, maybe even like I happen to like, I have some gum, like, hey, you want a piece of gum? I'm offering good things to you, and I've asked for nothing in return. The longer that we interact that way, the more you're going to have some social capital built up with me. The more you're going to have some instinct of, this is a pretty good guy, he's interacted with me for a while without being weird, he's providing value, etc. Then if I asked you for something minor at the end of that interaction, you'd probably be like, okay, fine, whatever, we'll do, right? As opposed to if I went in and asked you for something right away, you'd probably say no. Okay, so that's building up social capital. So anytime that you're offering value and asking for nothing, you're building social capital. Anytime you're trying to ask for something, you are spending social capital, right? And if you have a bunch of capital and you spend a little bit, that's okay, right? It's okay. It's like a bank account. You have a bunch of money in it, you take a little bit out, you still have a bunch of money in the bank account, it's okay. You still have a lot more than before you started depositing. But let's say you try and make a big withdrawal and you don't have the funds to back that withdrawal up. The bank says, we don't like you anymore, right? And then it says, okay, withdrawal, like penalties, fees, end of our existing interaction, whatever it is. And it's the same thing with a girl. If I go in and I ask for more than I can get away with, ask for more than I've earned within the interaction, oftentimes that will be the end of the interaction. Okay? So the key thing that you're trying to do with intent and moving things forward is you want to show as much as you can without overspending your social capital. And here's the really, really amazing thing. If you move an interaction forward and you fail at it, like you hear no or you get rejected, that makes the interaction much worse, right? For example, if you say you bring a girl home and you're making out, and then you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go for it. You try really hard to have sex with her, and you're maybe like a little pushy even, right? If you don't have sex with her, if she leaves, she's probably like, oh fuck, that was like, that was a little creepy. I don't want to go back there. That, like, bad things happen there, right? And you're probably never gonna see that girl again, right? Because why? Because you tried for more than she was willing to, like, she was okay with, right? And also, if you tried in a pushy way rather than like a nice sort of charming way, that doesn't help either. But you tried for more than you had the social capital for. You overspent. You went too aggressive. You made her feel a little scared. She's probably not going to see you again. However, on the other hand, say that you get that same girl back and you start making out, you pace it a little bit better, the interaction's good, and you end up having sex with her. Now, she has a very strong reason to be actually more attached to you than if you had never moved things forward, right? The fact that you actually had, especially if the sex was good, because you actually did have sex with her, now that actually builds social capital. And that happens a lot of times. The fact that there is, you say, you ask for something, she says yes, and then she doesn't get like a negative consequence because of it, that actually builds tremendous social capital. So it's actually important to move forward, and it's important to try for things and be like spending that capital on some level too. Make sense? So you must, the key point here is you must show intent, and the key cornerstone of your game on a certain level should be intent. Right? Again, what does the perfect interaction look like? It looks a little bit like that porn interaction. Looks a little bit like the bad porno. Now, don't expect that you're actually going to have interactions that look that way, but
You never know.
if and when you think you have the opportunity to move it in that direction, go ahead and move it in that direction. And understand, and here's another very, very key understanding, okay? Understand that you should be a good decision for the girl. If you are a good decision for the girl, then you're doing her a favor by showing intent. If you are a bad decision for the girl, if you're a creepy, weird guy that's gonna like abuse her in some way or steal money from her or whatever, fuck her over, then you are not offering value, right? And then showing intent is like actually doing her harm. Does that make sense? So it's very important that you have that fundamental, I am offering good things, right? And if you are offering good things, then that intent will come out very, very well. I'll give you an example from the world of sales. Zig Ziggler, one of the greatest sales trainers, probably one of the greatest salesmen of all time, now deceased. But this is a story he tells from early in his sales career, which I think is a really, really interesting, kind of fascinating story about the sales process. So anyway, he's going through somewhere in like the rural South, and he's where like a lot of people know each other, and it's like very like close community, like close-knit communities. And he's selling this like cookware product to all these different people. So he goes to this one guy who like is totally a perfect demographic for what he's buying, completely could benefit from him. The product would do him so much good. But when it gets down to like the point where he's like, you know, actually selling the product, he's given the feature, he's given the benefits, the guy likes it. But when he gets down to actually selling it, this guy basically doesn't have indoor plumbing in his house, right? He has like the outhouse in the back, and he's lived with an outhouse like his whole life. And he says, look, I got the money for your product right here, and you ain't getting it, because I've been saving up to get an indoor toilet, and I am not giving you this money because I want my damn indoor toilet. And I've been saving up for so long, and I finally have the money, and you're not getting it. Right? But I got your money right here, and you're not getting it. And so in this particular instance, Zig Ziggler had grown up rather poor as well, and he had the whole outhouse thing, and he knew, you know, those cold winter nights. He identified with the guy, and he's like, I get that. He's like, okay, sir, I'm not gonna, whatever. And he went, and he actually left. And then about a week later, he was talking to like the sister or cousin of this person. And she said, man, we'll say brother, like my brother hates you. He's like, what? What are you talking about? I'm a nice guy. Why does he hate me? He's like, well, you know, he said you wouldn't sell him any cookware. He's like, I tried pretty hard to sell him some cookware, actually, and you know, I'm very willing to if you want. He's like, no, he wanted to buy that cookware from you and you wouldn't sell it to him. He's like, well, I'll promise you I'll sell it to him. Let's go talk to him right now. He's like, no, he won't buy it from you anymore. He doesn't trust you anymore. He doesn't trust you anymore. And Zig Ziggler said, that he thought about that for a really long time and he was massively confused by it. Like for months, even years, he was so confused by it. But over the course of his selling career, it dawned on him what actually happened there. And here's what happened. He knew that his product would be good for the guy. And the guy knew that he knew it would be good for him.
Yeah.
But Zig Ziggler didn't push. Knowing that it'd be good for him, he didn't push. And so the fact that he didn't push made the guy think either he was lying to me and he doesn't have a good product, or he doesn't care enough about me to give me the good product. And so because he empathized too much and didn't actually have faith enough in his product and push hard enough to actually make the guy buy his product, the guy didn't trust him, right? And that can actually happen even within the context of a male-female interaction. I had this when I was growing up because I never showed intent. Because in middle school, early high school years, I would have crushes on girls, and I would try and spend time with them. I'd try and make them like me, but I would never actually ask them out. I would never actually move forward on it. And I'd have a window. There'd be a certain window, and almost invariably, because I don't know, for some reason I was always pretty good when I knew someone at being charming, at getting what I wanted, that sort of thing. And so I would get the girls to like me, but I never actually capitalized on that window. And so at some point, the window would close. And once it closed, it really wouldn't open anymore. Because they would just feel like I was disingenuous. They'd feel like I wasn't genuine. If I actually liked them and hadn't made a move, then either I didn't like them enough or didn't care about them enough to like really want it to happen, or I didn't think I was good for them. And so there was this sort of like that door closed, there was no more trust anymore, right? So it's interesting to think about that if you really are a good option for a girl, if you really are the best decision she can make, it's kind of your responsibility to try a little hard. Now, don't take this the wrong way. Don't be that guy that's like, well, I'm a good decision, so every girl should fuck me. And if they don't, they're fucking, don't be that way, okay? Like, no means no. Don't be super pushy. Don't be that guy. But at the same time, do be a bit persistent. You do need to be persistent, but the key thing is your persistence should come from a good place. If you're persistent in a creepy way, girls will get creeped out, they will get offended, and you will probably have a lot of fucking drama and hassle in your life. But if you're persistent in a positive way, and especially a positive, lighthearted, fun way, where it's actually coming from a position of I just want to offer you value, usually people will like you and trust you even if they say no to you, right? Here's a good way you can tell actually. This doesn't happen to me a lot, but it does happen occasionally. Is say I'm talking to a girl and she seems to like me, and I like to close. Like I'm a strong closer. So I'm pushing for things, and it turns out she like has a boyfriend or is married or something like that. And then sometimes I'll just like teasingly like keep going just because, and sometimes like I'll be like, well, if it's like a boyfriend thing, sometimes I'm like, well, just because he came along first, in my mind, just because he got there first doesn't mean he's better for her. So I'll be still a little bit persistent. And sometimes I end up sleeping with girls with boyfriends because of that. But sometimes what happens, this is really interesting, especially like with like girls that are married or like have a fiance, have someone really serious in their life. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll give me a referral. They'll actually be like, well, actually, I have a niece who's really pretty amazing. You should meet her. Like, whoa, okay. Didn't really expect that to happen, but it did. And why? Because you are being needy, you are being a little bit like over persistent, but at the same time you're conveying so many positive qualities, right? And you're saying like, I do think I'm a good deal for you. I'm trying to like offer you value, and they can tell that it's coming from genuinely a good place, even if it is a little obnoxious, right? Yeah, and not a lot of times, but sometimes they'll refer you. And I've gotten probably a handful of good leads that have ended up generating like really hot girls that have come into my life through referral, right? So it's kind of nice when that happens, but why does that happen? It's because I clearly have belief in my product, if you're looking at it from a sales perspective, right? And that's key. That's absolutely key. They say, again, go back to sales, which is a great metaphor for game. The salesman who doesn't have very good technique, like doesn't know a lot about sales, but really believes in his product, will usually sell better than the guy that knows every sales technique in the book, but doesn't believe in his product, right? And that's where inner game comes in, right? Because every single thing you do, you're conveying not what you're saying only, but you're conveying everything about what you're saying. You're conveying your eye contact. You're conveying, does your voice quiver? You're conveying, am I confident and persistent? Do I back down when I meet resistance? You're conveying all those different things, and that's where genuineness comes in. How many people here are familiar with the concept of honest signals? You guys know what this is? A few. Okay. Honest signals is the idea that certain things in our behavior are very, very hard to fake, and certain things are very easy to fake. So something that's very easy to fake in a man-woman context is a pickup line. You can go in and have some like clever pickup line or regurgitate something you read off the internet. That's pretty easy to fake. What's hard to fake is when a girl says like, you're totally full of shit. The way you react in that moment where you're being like threatened unpredictably, that's hard to fake, okay? And honest signals, because they're hard to fake, convey a lot of information, and people respond very, very, very strongly to them. The classic evolutionary example of this is the peacock. You take the peacock, has these bright feathers all over his body. Now, do you think those feathers make it easier or harder for some animal to come kill him and eat him?
Easier.
Much easier. Makes it much, much, much easier for some animal to come kill him and eat him. So why does the peacock have those feathers?
Attractive.
It attracts the women, but why is it attractive? Well, the reason is this, two things. Number one, the specific colors in those feathers, the peacock would have had to have eaten certain foods and have certain nutrients in his body in order to make those colors physically. So he's physically has to be healthy to make those colors. He's showing that he has like, a healthy body, healthy immune system. He's not sickly. So that's number one. Number two, the fact that he can survive in spite of being basically a walking billboard for come eat me, says I truly do have survival value, and if you have kids with me, your kids truly will have survival value. So the peahen responds very strongly to the peacock that has those flashy feathers. Right? Similarly, the human female responds strongly to the man who can withstand social pressure. The man who can like put himself in a social environment and not crumble. Right? Why is it, for example, that, here's a question. So you have CEO of a Fortune 500 company, lead singer of a rock band, famous rock band. Who has more money? CEO, well, if he's an owner, probably the CEO. CEO owner at least, right? Probably has more money. More like total success in life, more power, more ability to do whatever. Okay, fair enough, he has all that. Who do more girls have posters of on their wall? Right? Who has an easier time sleeping with girls if he wants to? The rock star. Why is that? Why is that? Well, it's because of two different things. One is tolerance to social pressure. One is the fact that when he's being a rock star, he's putting himself in front of a crowd, like a huge audience, and he's performing, right? And he has honest signals. Honest signals, in his case, is the fact that he has 10,000 or 1 million people watching him, and he's able to sing loud and clear at the top of his voice, have good vocal resonance, and not have his voice cracking from nervousness. That's extreme tolerance to social pressure. That means what from a social perspective? What from an evolutionary perspective? That when I've been put in tough social situations, when I've been like under the scrutiny of the tribe, I've received positive feedback, right? So that's conveying that, that capability, that ability. The other thing that's really interesting is that the rock star's work is more visible, right? So it's an opportunity for him to convey some area of excellence without seeming to try to. Okay? So the CEO, the girl may vaguely intellectually know that he's excellent in some area, may know that he's successful, but she doesn't actually see it and she doesn't see people responding to it. But with the rock star, she sees it in front of her eyes. She sees him doing something excellent, people loving him for it, and him not trying to show off, not trying to brag. Right? That's what true high value behavior within a tribal context would look like. Right? Like the guy who is just the best hunter in the tribe and he's not showing off, he just brings the most meat every day and everybody loves him for it. That's conveying social value. Or the chief who, when he talks, everybody turns and listens to him and gives him the floor. That's people responding to him. That's that social proof, social value. All right, so that's that particular type of honest signal. All right, but for you as a man, when you believe in yourself, you're going to be conveying a lot of these positive honest signals. And you can say a lot of the wrong things if it's coming from the right frame, and it'll work. If you say the right thing from the wrong frame, it won't work, right? If I go, hey, I like you, I wanted to talk to you, right? I'm saying something that like could work as a standard pick. I mean, like, hey, I like you, I want to talk to you is totally fine as a pickup line, as a way to start an interaction. In fact, a lot of girls, when they talk about guys being disingenuous or ungenuine, like, why can't a guy just come up and say that as the pickup line? Right? So there's nothing wrong with that, but when you say it hesitantly, it doesn't work so well, right? If you were that nervous, what could you do that's even better than that? Well, that's a little bit better than that at least. Instead of being hesitant, like, I like you, I want to meet you, you could actually just own the nervousness, right? Now, it's not the ideal. It'd be better to just not be nervous, right? But if you are nervous, just own it. But like, hey, I want to talk to you. I'm actually a little nervous. I don't, do this that often, but I just thought you were really cute, and I don't know, I had to talk to you. I don't really know what to say now. I hadn't really planned it out, but hi, I'm Todd. Nice to meet you,
Yeah,
right? At least it's genuine, and at least you're not, you are reactive to the situation, but at least you're not reactive to the fact you're reactive to the situation. Okay? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Here's a little trick. Try and find the level at which you can find self-acceptance. Okay? So if you're a really confident guy, you can be like, I'm a man, this is a woman, I'm a strong human being, I'm gonna go talk to her, and I accept that. That's the ideal. That's like true like value. Now, if on the other hand you're like, well, I'm a little nervous. Well, can you at least accept that you're nervous, own that you're nervous, and not be nervous about the fact that you're nervous? Right? Can you not be reactive to the fact that you're nervous? And if you can't do that, if you're nervous and you're nervous about the fact that you're nervous, can you at least accept the fact that you're nervous about the fact that you're nervous and accept that? Right? Can you come up with some level where you are okay with reality? Whatever the reality is, even if it's not the best conveyance of reality, even if it's not the ideal reality, can you just say, I'm okay with reality as it is, and I'm going to do the best I can, right? And that's intent as well, because that's saying, like, I accept reality, I'm going to go with it, right? I'm not hiding from anything. I'm putting out what I want. I'm being honest. I'm being direct, right? And that actually is usually a better way to go and a better result than if you try and hide on that level. I'll tell you another quick story. This is years ago. I was living in New York, and myself and at the time went out with one of his friends who was like this guy who'd just been good with girls since he was like 10, right? No, different guy. But so anyway, this guy at the time was dating 3 different like professional like New York models, like high-end, like very attractive women. So we take him out, and we're at this club, and it's, so decent club, but there's these 2 girls that are just clearly the hottest girls in the club, just like head and shoulders above everyone else. And so we're doing boot camp. We've sent some students in, and then my other assistant mentions him. He's like, hey, you should talk to those girls. Like, okay, sure, whatever. Goes and talks to him, and the hotter of the 2 is the entire time like biting her lip, like fixing her hair, like giggling, like very, very responsive to him, very reactive to him. We're like, holy shit, this lucky fucker. Like, why do we have to be on boot camp? Why can't we be there right now? So we go about, we'll go about our business. We're like glancing over every now and again to see how he's going. And it's looking better and better and better. If anything, just we're like, oh shit, this he's so in. Like, we're like, dude, he might have a threesome. What's going on here, right? And then about 15 minutes later, he comes back over and starts talking to us. She's like, hey, what's up? Like, no big deal. We're like, dude, why are you here? What are you doing? Like, I don't know. I just, want to come back and talk to you guys. And like, why are you not over there? Like, whatever. I'd rather be here. Like, what? And like, did you at least get her number? You're gonna follow up? I'm like, no, she was lame. Right? Now the question for you is, why was that guy dating 3 other models?
Oh, because to him, he's like, I don't care.
Because he was selective. I'm sure there were other things. I'm sure there were other characteristics. He was a good-looking guy. He was successful. He was funny. He was charismatic. I'm sure there are a lot of other traits. But another thing that was helping him was that he was abundant, right? He wasn't just thinking, I hope I get this girl. He was thinking like, let me have a good interaction and we'll see. And girls that hot are not used to that. They're used to guys being like, oh, I'll do anything for you, baby. Please, please, anything. Right? If you actually are, wait, you seem cool, but like, what's your story? And then they say something like, that's fucking lame. Like, go shoot yourself. I'm just kidding. Don't shoot yourself. But like, seriously, get your shit together. Right? And actually interact with them the way you'd interact with a normal human being. Right? You can kid around with a normal human being. You can be negative towards a human being. You can disqualify. You'd be like, yeah, we're not going to get, oh, you live too far away. You can actually risk the interaction with a normal human being. That makes you more attractive. That makes it all come together a bit better. All right? So it is very, very important that you be selective in your intent. It's also important that the girl, if she's going to date you or be in a relationship with you or sleep with you, this is very important. Remember this. It's important that the girl feels like she's winning, okay? She should feel like she's winning by being with you rather than losing by being with you, okay? So if you walk up and your entire approach, the entire premise of your approach is, you're so hot, will you please come sleep with me? Now, if the girl says yes to that eventually, she could come with you and have like a great night of sex. It's no problem. Girls like sex too. It could happen, right? And in fact, on sort of a less obvious level, that's how a lot of guys game. That's how a lot of guys game is like, oh, I like you, I like you, I like you. And the girl's like, well, okay, you're a little lame, but you're fun. Oh, a little lame, but you're cute. All right, well, it's the end of the night, I guess, I don't want to go to bed yet. I'll just hang out with you for a little longer. And then eventually they're like, well, he's kind of cute. It's late at night. I'm kind of horny. Okay, fine, I'll give in. Right? Okay, fine, I'll let him have sex with me. Right? That's how a lot of guys get, and that's how a lot of guys get laid. And nothing really, I guess, wrong with it. But it's not the ideal. Right? The ideal, like what I'm going for in my game, is I want it so that at the end of the night, the girl is like asking me to have sex. I want it to be like when we go home, I'm like going and like, I'm in the kitchen like grabbing a drink of water, and she's like patting the bed and be like, come here, talk to me. Come over here. Why are you not like that kind of thing where she wants me? Or when we start kissing, she's the one like kissing me. She's the one that starts like taking my clothes off, ideally. Now, does it always happen this way? No. A lot of the times it's mutual, or even I'm still escalating more, but she's escalating back. But that's what you should be going for. You should be going for that sort of interaction where it's mutual and it's not like she's just giving in, but she's an active participant. And ideally that even she's winning in some regard. Right? So if she feels through the interaction that you started talking to her, you liked her a little bit, but you weren't sure, and then she said some cool things, you respect the fact that she said some cool things, she won you over, now the narrative in her head is, oh, I won. Oh, I got him. Oh, he was interested in me, that kind of thing. Right? A lot of girls, this happens a ton actually. A girl meets a guy, and she doesn't really want to sleep with him necessarily, but for some reason, he doesn't seem that into her, and it like annoys her. She's like, why isn't this guy into me? And she's like, I don't really like him, but I'm gonna make him like me, right? I'm gonna figure out what's with this fucking guy, right? And then they work for him and like try and get him to like her, and then one thing leads to another, and they have sex. Happens a lot, and that's winning. That's when she feels like she won, and the interaction's a win. Let's take the opposite view. Let's figure out a scenario where it's very easy for the girl to feel like having sex with you is losing. One that comes up for me a lot is, let's say, for example, that a girl knows what I do for a living when she meets me. Very interesting. What frame does that put in the girl's mind? If the girl sleeps with me, she's just the next girl that fell for it, right? She's the next girl that fell for the pickup artist pickup lines. Yay, next notch on the bedpost, right?
Hey, that's kind of
If it's framed that way, it's framed as, if she has sex with me, it's a loss. What would happen in the girl's mind for it to be a win for her? For her to win, sort of socially, it would be if I take her on date after date and spend time and attention on her and don't have, like, without her even having sex with me, when theoretically I'm the guy that could, like, get all these other girls, right? That makes her very high social status compared to them. Excuse me. And interestingly enough, that's exactly what tends to happen when girls are very aware of what I do for a living early in the interaction. As they get into these interactions where they're like, oh, let me, have you take me on 20 dates and have you jump through hoops, and let's just be friends and hang out for like a year. Like that's sort of their frame, because that's sort of how they win, right? Even if they're very intrigued by me, very attracted to me, it kind of goes that direction, or it has a tendency to go that direction. Now, fortunately, I'm very good, and I can actually turn that around a lot of the time. And also, fortunately, I'm able to frame things in other ways so that it is more of a win for them, right? And here's the interesting, ironic thing. If, for example, we just like, it's just like, we meet, it's so much fun, we don't really talk that much about like work or whatnot, and then we just like each other and hook up, and then afterwards the girl finds out what I do for a living, now the sex has already happened, right? And now how does she win? The way she wins is by keeping me around.
Oh.
The way she wins is by being like, here's the player guy, oh, I'm gonna win him over, oh, I'm gonna tame the player. And then it actually kind of works to my benefit, right? But it's all in the framing. It's all in, is it a win for her or a loss for her, right? It's all in perception, okay? And the other thing to realize is that for men, we usually know at least pretty much if we'd sleep with a girl pretty quickly. Like we look at a girl and we're like, yeah, I'd fuck that. Or, whatever, right? For a girl, that's not necessarily the case. She needs to kind of get to know you a little bit and needs to sort of experience your personality because it's less to do directly with the physical. Now, some girls, they'll just see a hot guy and be like, I want to fuck that guy. And that does happen, especially at certain times in their life, certain times in their ovulation cycle, whatever. It does happen. And certain types of girls just are that way. But for the most part, women need more personality conveyed and it's less to do with physical. So they need that experience. And this is where, how many of you guys have heard Julian's metaphor of like it being a movie? Have you guys heard this one? Yeah. So he says basically it's like a movie. The interaction's like a movie. And the climax is the best part. The end of the movie is the best part. The sex being the end of the interaction, that's the best part. But the climactic part only matters, it only makes sense if you've seen the rest of the movie. Right? Outside of context, it doesn't have that same meaning. And so that's what the girl really wants, is she wants that whole movie building up to it so that the climax itself is good. So that it's meaningful and it has a good narrative to it. And that's, again, letting the girl win. Right? Letting the good guy win in the movie as opposed to the bad guy, so to speak. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the initial interaction, how to show intent, and actually what you brought up, which is a good point, which is how do you pick your target? How do you pick the girl that you actually like within the interaction? And that's that you bridge the intent gap a little further, right? You take a risk, basically. You take a risk of escalation with the girl you like that you're not taking with other girls, right? So that's really what it comes down to. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about in terms of intent is we talk about value and comfort, right? Value and comfort. But the thing is that building comfort, getting to know the girl, should also be intentful. And this is where guys mess up a lot. A lot of guys are really good at conveying themselves as like cool, alpha, fun, dominant guys and getting the girl to like them. And like, okay, cool, time to build comfort. And then they suddenly become Mr. Cho. They're like, so where are you from? So what do you do? So how old are you? So what college do you go to? And the girl's like, what the fuck happened to that cool guy I was talking to 10 minutes ago? Like, where'd that go? Right? So two things. Number one, as you're getting to know the girl, pepper in that intense stuff still. Right? So you're getting to know her, you're building comfort, you're letting her trust you, and you're saying, I'm interested in getting to know you, which by the way is intentful, right? But then you're also still peppering in the flirtatious stuff. It's not just a logical conversation. And then the second thing is ask questions you actually care about the answer to. Don't just do this as a formal process. Do not ever think of game as ticking a series of boxes. That's how so many people think of it. You know, the old thing that we learn in school is like, first base, second base, third base, home run, right? Did you get to first base? Did you that's like from the 50s and stuff, but it's the same kind of thing, right? Did you kiss her? Did you feel her up, right? Don't look at it as a series of like steps to be accomplished. Look at it as a dialogue. Look at it as communication. Right? This is one of the best things my dad ever told me. My dad told me two good pieces of advice about game growing up. First is he said, if you want girls to like you, just say hello and goodbye to every girl, whether she's attractive or not. Right? This is probably the best piece of game advice I ever got that I never followed as a kid. Right? Great piece of advice. And the second thing he told me is love is communication. Right? And for this I'll say like intimate, like anything sexual, anything man to woman, it's all communication. So it's not about the actual act itself, but it's about what is the communication of that act. So for example, if I had a choice between I'm interacting with a girl and like we're kissing, but every time we kiss, I'm like trying for it and she's like kind of like being okay with it and then she's ending the kiss first, versus we haven't kissed at all, but we're like holding hands, and if I drop my hand or pull away, she like grabs my hand back. I would prefer the second one, even though like in the check mark theory, the kiss is like more advanced than holding hands. I've gotten further in the interaction. I care much more about the nature of that escalation. I care that she's participating and that the communication is she likes me, we like each other, as opposed to I want something from you and you're resisting it. Right? So the communication matters more than the objective. That makes sense? That's very, very critical. And within the scope of getting to know the girl, within the scope of the building comfort phase, all that kind of stuff, ask questions you genuinely care about the answer to. I want you to actually be screening and qualifying for real. Don't just ask questions because you know you have to. Don't just ask like dumb shit like, oh, can you cook? Are you adventurous? When you don't give a fuck, right? What I would encourage everyone in this room to do is make a sort of like a mental list of maybe about 5 qualities that you really want in a girl. Ideally non-physical qualities. Okay, things that you can't just see by looking at her. And then when you're talking to the girl, once you can tell she likes you, start actually assessing whether she has these qualities. And actually, interestingly enough, as you're assessing whether she has these qualities, if you communicate the right way to her, a lot of times she'll adopt those qualities with you. Human beings are very, very flexible in the way they interact. Like, I would guarantee you probably that the way you interact with your mother is different than the way you interact with your father, different than the way you interact with any siblings, any coworkers, and different than the way you interact with someone you're intimate with. And to a certain level, you could almost say you're a different person for all those different people, right? I mean, you're still you still have a core values and a core personality that you are, but you are a different person in all of those contexts. Similarly, when a girl dates a variety of guys throughout her life, she is a different girl for each of those guys. Right? For one guy, she may be the very structured, do it by the book, like maybe not even like very sexually open type of girl. For another guy, she might be the like, oh, who the fuck cares? Let's just have fun. Let's be adventurous type of girl. Because she has those different abilities to have those personalities within her. It's just a question of which is she bringing out for which guy. And that has to do with like what she's comfortable doing with him, the nature of the interaction. It also has to do with what sorts of like guidelines and expectations he has had and he has demonstrated within the interaction. So number one, when you are getting to know the girl, find out if she has those qualities. Number two, encourage those qualities. Encourage those qualities, because it may be that she's not used to being a certain thing, but she'd be very happy being that way. Right? It may be that a girl has been very sheltered her whole life and she's like done everything her parents said and everything her teacher said. And that's how she knows how to interact. You ask her about it, she'll tell you that. If you don't guide her, she'll continue being that. But she would love more than anything else to actually do what she really wants and not listen to someone for a change. Or not like you'd follow all the rules for a change. And if you actually encourage her to be adventurous, take some risks, take some chances, she might love you for it. She might not. You don't know. So it's a process of, on one level, screening, finding out what she already is. It's another process of establishing for her what type of girl you're looking for and allowing her to fill in that mold if she wants to. And so a relationship becomes this sort of average between what you want and what she wants, where it's not like you dominating everything over her, but it's also not you falling into all her frames either. It becomes a situation where you both ideally are happy, right? And a good thing to think of on this, this is another philosophy which I really like. He says people say relationships should be 50-50. He says fuck that. I think a relationship should be 95-5. And he doesn't mean that it's 95% him and 5% the girl. He means for both parties it should be 95-5. It should be a lot of we're doing the things we want to do. We're together because we love the things we're doing together. We love the interaction. We love it how it is. And then you do have that 5% where it's like, she's like, come meet my parents. You're like, well, I don't fucking like your parents, but I'll do it because it means something to you, right? And that's okay to have that 5% because the rest of it's so good. But mostly what you're looking for, you're not trying to like mold someone into being 95% who you want, but what you're trying to do is screen and find the girl who naturally or is able to be 95% what you want, while still being happy and being 95% what she wants, right? And that's when you have that truly great relationship. In order to have that happen though, you need to actually be screening. Not just going through the motions, not just qualifying because you know you have to, not just because you know she has to like jump through some hoops for her to feel like she won, right? But actually legitimately qualifying. So that's like a homework assignment for everybody. When you go home, think of 5, at least, ideally, qualities that you actually really want in a girl. And then when you talk to girls, actually try and find out if they're these things and actually tell them, show them that this is the type of girl you're looking for. Let them know what they're getting into. You'll find your interactions will be massively better for that. And if you want to, you could even say like, you could have 5 qualities for like a one night stand type of girl and 5 qualities for a relationship girl. Because they might be different, right? It might be that within a relationship, you want a girl who's like, follows the rules and is smart and responsible and that kind of stuff. And then for a one night stand, you want a girl who's just fucking adventurous. Who knows? It could be. But in any case, whatever the interaction, know what it is you want, convey it honestly, and allow the girl to fill that role. And if she isn't the girl that'll fill that role, well, you can find another girl who will, most of the time. We'll go from the back of the room first. Yeah?
You gave a few examples of going from like expressing yourself to getting to know each other and then talking about the togetherness.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that same kind of, some examples of the sexual verbal escalation going from weather to sex?
Sure. Well, one easy way to go from weather to sex very quickly is you're talking about the weather and you say like, oh, it's so hot today. Be like, oh, wow. Well, I appreciate that. I just got here, but thanks, right? You could just misinterpret it. Or if the girl says, I'm so hot today, you should go, oh, really, right? There's all these ways to misinterpret something, move it forward. Another way is to just change the topic, right? You're talking about the weather, and you can just throw something in. So, blah, blah, blah. So, oh my God, there's the cutest look you just gave me. But yeah, it is unseasonably warm, isn't it? Right? You just throw it in there like it's not that big of a deal. And then you see how she responds to it. If she seems to if she blushes and is happy and giggly over the fact that you said it, that's probably a good sign. If she is kind of put off by it, then maybe you have a little more work to do, or maybe it's just not going to happen, right? So you can always test that, but understand that conversation doesn't have to be linear, right? You shouldn't be able to trace a conversation, right? If you ever had those conversations where you stay up with your friends and you're just discussing life, and all of a sudden it's 8 in the morning, you don't know what happened to the night. If someone were to ask you on those days, what did you talk about? You probably wouldn't be able to give them a linear dissertation of exactly. It probably went a lot of different ways. Maybe you're talking about something and someone has some random thought they throw in that's completely off topic but kind of vaguely relates back. That's how a normal conversation goes. And it's okay for it to be that way. Your conversation does not have to be linear. It doesn't have to go from level 1 intent to level 2 to level 3. You can go from 1 to just sprinkle in a little level 4 and then back to 1 and 2. You just have to generally be moving in that direction. And it does not have to be logical at all. I could have, I can just do a little monologue for you if you want, where it'll be a little ADD, but it's not even that weird, right? So yeah, anyway, I was born in actually Colorado, which in some ways is similar to Texas, actually. Although we have, you have Texas' state of mind, don't mess with Texas, all that kind of stuff. And then you have Whataburger, right? Which is, that's just Texas all the way. Yeah, we ski in Colorado though. We ski. Actually, well, now we snowboard, but when I grew up, we skiing. I can't even speak English. It's so funny, actually, my English teacher, he told us that he was a very elitist school, but he said every time you open your mouth, you convey yourself as a member of the ruling class. I thought that was a really interesting, very elitist thing to say. But yeah, I lived in New York for a while. And it was fucking crazy because it's all these really successful, upwardly mobile people, and they're all doing these amazing things with life, but they live in little fucking closets and it smells bad, right? And there's cockroaches, and I'm why does everybody want to live in this fucking place, right? So there I just discussed 6 different topics. It was a little bit nonlinear. It was a little all over the place, but it wasn't so crazy that you necessarily noticed it, right? But what did I really what was that little speech about? It's about this, that, this, that, this. It's totally normal. It's totally okay for you to be a little all over the place. And so if a girl is talking about some topic that is not going to take the interaction anywhere, if she's talking about her purse collection or gossiping about some coworker that you don't know and you're just bored by the interaction, it's fully okay for you to interrupt that interrupt that conversational thread and move on to a thread that's more likely to be conducive to the type of interaction you want. It's totally fine. On the other hand, if she's talking about something she's deeply passionate about, a lot of times the best thing to do is sit back, listen to her deeply, acknowledge, maybe make fun of her here and there, or throw in your 2 cents. But for the most part, let her talk about what she's passionate about. Let her open up to you, right? And so if that's the case, that's totally fine too. So you don't have to be interrupting all the time, but you do have the opportunity to do so, and you are not stuck on any conversational topic, even if it's your own. If you start off with talking about some conversational topic and you can tell a minute in, oh shit, this is going nowhere, don't be oh, I better finish my story first. Just interrupt yourself and go on a different direction, right? The emotional content of the communication matters much more than the logical. Does that make some sense within all of that? Cool, yeah.
About celebrating social equity, I'm trying to reconcile 2 things that you said. One is that a lot of times if you try to overspend, it closes that door. But then you also said that when you try to kiss, but it doesn't work out, that's actually better than not even doing it. So that's what I'm wondering.
Good observation. Very good observation. So in that context, this is an interesting thing too. What you're basically talking about right now is there are 2 different models of game at play here, and one is more important than the other in a particular context. So one model of game is the social capital model, and that's important in this context. So within the social capital model, if I try for the kiss, if I had succeeded at kissing, it would have been better than failing at kissing, right? So within that, social capital makes sense. The other model that's at play here is that you have to show intent model, which is overarching, which is if game without intent is not game. So you're better off trying to kiss and failing than having not tried, especially if there's not been intent in your interaction otherwise. Does that make sense? So it's better to have intent badly than to not have intent, but it still would be even better yet if your intent was good. So the intent model is the more important model in this particular situation. So that's the overarching model, but then the social capital model still is at play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I feel like based on my experiences, I agree with that too, because it feels so much worse to go through so many experiences where you don't go and try to do anything, whereas like that haunts me to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do it now.
Yeah, that's why I finally did. I was just like, I've failed by not trying way too many times. If I'm gonna fail anymore, I'm gonna fail by trying. That was the big distinction for me. That was my big decision at like sort of the end of high school, yeah.
Okay, so earlier we were talking about it's obvious a girl doesn't really grab her hand, you kind of cut it out after a while. I also watched a lot of online, it's this 4-try rule, this 4-time rule. So how do you think about that? Do you give it any attention, or do you just say, cool, no?
Right, okay, so there's a few different things there. Now, first of all, like there is 4 times rule, right? You can try up to 4 times, totally agree, persistence is good, and persistence actually conveys again that you believe in yourself, right? If the first sign of it's not gonna work, you just quit, that conveys I don't believe in myself, I don't believe in my product, etc. right? So persistence is a good thing. Within like the social capital model though, there's 2 things. Number 1, there is the 4 tries rule, but at the same time, it'd be better if you got it the first time. Right? It would be better if you didn't have to go through times 2, 3, and 4, but those are still available to you. Does that make sense? So that's a part of it as well, is that. Hang on, there's one other thing I wanted to say. I forgot I lost my thread on that. I'll come back to that again. I had one other thing I wanted to say on that, and I just completely spaced on it. But the general thing though is that the persistence is fine to a point, but it would be better if you didn't have to. That's the biggest thing. Oh, the other thing I was gonna say, here's what it is that there's 4 times rule, assuming that the tries themselves were not really awful. Okay? So if you try for something and like try and like hold her hand or whatever and she says no, but it's in a happy, fun, cool vibe, then you can try again. And then if it's still in a happy, fun, cool vibe, then you can try again. Right? But if the first time you try and take her hand, she says no, you're like, fuck you, cunt, this isn't, like, what the fuck is this shit? How dare you not take my hand? Who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Right? Once you do it that way, you're at the 0 tries rule, okay, the 0 times rule. So and then actually says this too, he qualifies it that way. He says as long as you're not like socially retarded, as long as you're not, as long as you haven't done anything socially miscalibrated along the way, you get up to 4 tries. If any of the tries themselves are inherently awful, then you get no more. So that's also a factor. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, see, I love intent because a lot of that's probably one of my better qualities compared to anything else. But my problem is like when I give all my cards away, like I always want to have like 1 card back, but like how can we always hold 1 card? You know what I mean? Like, because you always want her to chase, but once you give the intent, she can't do that. And I've also had this problem, like it'll go really well, but because I'll get busier, I'll just not like lead back to the girl, because you end up getting a lot of numbers eventually. And I know that the set went amazing, but the set will just fizzle out. How can I reapproach that too? How can I keep that 1 last card?
Okay. So that's a very interesting model that you have in your head. And it's accurate to a point, and it's actually very helpful in a way, but you also have to be careful about it, okay? So I'll speak to it on 2 levels. Number 1, you're right in the fact that you do want to show intent, but you can't give everything away. Because we also talked about making sure that the girl knows that it's a win, right? Making her feel like she won. So if you go in and you're like, you walk up to a stranger and you're like, I love you unconditionally, I will do anything for you. Well, there's no more sexual tension there. There's no more like, I win if I get this, she already won. Like victory is already achieved, there's no accomplishment, there's nothing in there. And all the tension in the relationship goes slack. So that's what you're talking about in a way with keeping 1 card back, is like keeping that sexual tension, making sure she doesn't 100% know for sure she has you. That's a little bit like we talk about that movie, right? Where you want to have the movie and that makes the climax better. Well, if someone tells you what happens at the end of the movie, right, it makes the climax shitty. Right? So it's the same thing. If it's too obvious, if you're given so much intent or so much of your sort of like so much of you away, and you've said like I will do anything for you, I have no ability to walk away from this anymore, then at that point, yes, it does become boring. And that actually can happen a lot. That happens in cold approach. That actually happens a lot in relationships too. At some point, someone just like they will not walk away from the relationship no matter what, and then the other person just starts like nibbling at them,
Yeah, that's
right? They start like going for like one little concession, then they concede that and they go for another one. And then eventually, it's like the metaphor of like the camel that pokes his nose in the tent, and then eventually like he's sleeping in the tent and you're sleeping outside, right? It becomes that, and so you end up in a situation you don't want to be in, but worse yet, oftentimes the other party will now not respect you anymore from the fact that you let them do that. So not only like this, because it's sort of like a hell of their own making, where they turned you into a person they're no longer attracted to, and they also turn it into a shitty situation for you.
So how can we turn that around?
So
how can we get them back? Because I know that there's like a few girls that I approached and they
let me finish one question before we get into 5 others, all right? So you do need to always maintain some level of standards and some level of willingness to walk away. Understand, and this is very important, okay? Understand that no woman is going to fundamentally make you successful or a failure with women, okay? Now, that's not to say that no woman can change your life, right? If you marry a woman, have kids with a woman, have a great relationship with a woman, that did change your life in a positive way. If some girl screws you over, that changed your life in a negative way. So the girl can definitely have an effect on your life. But no girl determines whether you're successful or unsuccessful with girls, because if you don't end up with that one particular girl, you have a certain personality and skill set and ability and like level of charisma and whatever you have. And if you're not with her, you'll find another girl of probably roughly equal caliber out there somewhere. Okay? So don't think that like you absolutely have to have this one and only girl, and that no matter what happens, you can't walk away from it. Okay? You need to have that level of personal standards. Number one, so that you don't take it too much within the relationship, and number two, because it will make you remain the type of person that's worthy of the relationship. It will make you stay the type of person she'll respect. So have those personal standards. If you have at some point relaxed on those and let yourself be overstepped on them, it's difficult, but what you can usually do is you can either gradually reestablish them, or at some point you can just like be like, hey, look, this is not working. If it goes this way, it's not gonna, like, we won't last, but I do love you, I do care about this happening, so let's find a way that this can work. And you just step up and you say, like, these are my standards now, right? It's a lot harder to reestablish boundaries once you've let them slip. It's a lot harder to lay down the law once you've let it slide, but it can be done, right? It's much better to have your boundaries and your standards from the start. The other thing that's interesting, though, which be careful about, is that you're talking about this, like, keeping one card in reserve, and that's where your value comes from. Right? That's very reminiscent of when I first got into game. It was like the canned structured game, where it was all like, oh, you can't have me, no, hands off the merchandise, you and I wouldn't get along, that kind of stuff, right? And it does compel girls to like you. The problem is you're basically relying on a gimmick for your attraction. And in this case, you're relying on the I have one card held back as the gimmick for the attraction. And the problem there is that as soon as someone sees through the gimmick, you've lost everything, right? So the problem we used to have with like, oh, hands off the merchandise, this won't work, you and I wouldn't get along. The problem there was as soon as you go to escalate physically, so you're like, oh, hands off the merchandise, this wouldn't work, no, you're embarrassed, don't embarrass me in public, how do you roll with this girl? And they're like, hey, you're cute. And she's like, wait, why are you touching me? Why are you trying to kiss me? Like, you've been pushing me away the whole time. Was that all fake? Was that all bullshit? And so it made the process of escalation, which is kind of important to get, like, if you want to have sex, it's important to get physical at some point, right? It made that very difficult because it was incongruent with the other thing. Yeah. So anytime, and that's just one example, but anytime you're relying on some kind of a gimmick for attraction, you're it's very easy to be found out. In poker terms, it's a very exploitable strategy, if that makes sense. It's not a robust strategy. It's not something that really fundamentally is solid or works. It's sort of like, it's a gimmick, right? And so it'll only work to a point. It'll only work in certain contexts to a certain level. It's not fully rich. So what you want to be, though, is a man who genuinely has standards. A man who has enough abundance, whether you have it already or if you just like borrow it from your future, just assume you're gonna have the type of girls you want in the future and say, these are my standards, this is what I'll take in a relationship, this is what I won't, this is what I'm looking for. That's gonna go a long way for you overall. You have a question?
Yeah, with your dad's advice
Uh-huh.
of we say hello and goodbye to a woman, could you word that in a different way so you can get more context to it?
Well, the time he told this to me, I was about, I think like 5th grade. And he said to me, son, someday soon you're going to start to notice women, and you're going to think they're pretty nifty. And you're gonna wanna like have interactions with, like whatever, have relationships with it, something like that. It's like, and I'm gonna tell you, here's what you need to do. It's very simple. He said, just say hello and goodbye to every girl.
Or it's someone in your friend group, where would you say, because I know that you always, like, showing intent is good, but then there's definitely kind of, I don't know.
Risk and reward.
Yeah, there's,
Yep.
there's like some sort of escalation to it as well, I feel like, but I don't know.
Yeah, typically what I would say is, first of all, like if you're ever gonna take big risks in those sort of circumstances, be smart about it. Be very smart about it. Like don't do things that, if you have a job that you like, if you hate your job, what the fuck, who cares, right? But if you have a job that you like and would prefer not to lose, be a little circumspect about like who you choose to interact with in that way, and also in what context you do it. If you're hanging out outside of a work setting and something happens, that's a lot better in that context than if it happens within the work setting. The big thing I would say, and this is actually another good topic of intent as well, is that there's certain types of conversation that you can have with anyone and it's just socially acceptable, even if it does convey some emotionality, even if it can create arousal. And then there's other forms of interaction that you really can't have without it being, without it creating a something's happening between us frame, okay? And sort of to answer your question, I'm gonna give you a different example that relates, which is, let's say you're talking to 4 different girls in a group, right? And we all know that if you're talking to the girls in the group, oftentimes you have to kind of engage everyone, otherwise one of them's gonna get bored and drag the group away. So people ask me sometimes, if I'm talking to the girls I'm not interested in, or if they're like the more vocal ones, how do I make sure that the one who I end up with, who ends up liking me, I end up having like a real man-to-woman interaction with, how do I make sure it's that quiet one who I actually like? How do you do that? And the thing is this, you can talk to everyone without making it man-to-woman. You can even flirt a little bit with everyone without making it man-to-woman. Right? You can tease them. You can tease them about, oh, you're so silly, you're such a clown, or oh my God, what am I going to do with you? Those kind of things. You can do that kind of stuff to a limited amount with everybody. But oh my God, I love this girl. She's so much fun. We'd be like the best of friends, right? You throw in the word friends all of a sudden, and like it's okay, right? So you can flirt and like have that back and forth without making it man-to-woman. But as soon as you go, you know what, I'm very intrigued by you, right? When you single one girl out and say that. Or if you say, you know what, you and I are not going to get along, right? When you make the fact of you and her getting along an issue or an item. Or be like, you know what, part of me wants to have a crush on you, but part of me is not so sure, right? As soon as you like are overtly saying things like that, or overtly like, you remember the platonic conversation, you and I, and then we. As soon as you're starting to bridge into like you and I bridging towards we, that's when you're starting to get to like dicey areas, right? When you're talking about something potentially happening between you. Also, if you start escalating the nature of the conversation to sexual, right? Talking about the weather is totally platonic. Talking about like sexual experiences with someone is very sexual. So it's that gradient, right? So there's a certain gradient that you can do in any context. Within different contexts it changes, right? Like in some very formal contexts, you can only flirt just a very little bit before it's inappropriate. In other contexts, you can flirt a lot more before it's inappropriate. But there's certainly a level in those contexts where like if you cross that threshold, it's the inappropriate level. So what I would say is interact on the level that's still appropriate, but is showing the intent that's available within that environment. Does that make sense? And the other thing that will help you actually in a way is if you're generally a talkative person, generally a friendly person, and generally have a little tiny bit of flirtation in your interactions in general, that will extend that range that you're allowed. Right? Does that make sense? Like if you're like the quiet guy who never talks to anyone, and then to the girl you like, you're suddenly like making sort of hinting at suggestive jokes, the obvious is like, what the fuck, that's weird. But if you're the type of person that like talks and flirts with everyone, kind of has like a joking relationship with everyone, including even guys, right? You're just like, hey, whatever, not like in a sexual way, but like making fun of them even, right? If that's your nature, if you're that social guy, you'll get away with more in that context as well. But the thing is, there's a lot you can do within that safe realm. And then the other thing you could do is like get the situational escalation to a place where it could actually happen safely if you wanted to. But be very circumspect. Don't do stupid shit that's going to lose good jobs, okay? I don't want to get emails from people like, you fucker, you gave me this advice and it lost me my job. I don't want that. I always say that game should be a benefit to your life rather than a detraction from your life, okay?